Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is the Screen Watching Podcast. The premise of the podcast is this. We saw things on TV, we saw things in movies, we're here to talk about it. My name's Dan, joined here by Simon. This podcast has been going for a while. Some people refer to us as the Galactopods of podcasting, in that we just get in there and we just keep on working at it. Folks, we've got a big show. We're talking about the brand new Amazon Prime Video, Amy Sherman Palladino, Dan Palladino, dance extravaganza. It's called ETOILE. We're going to go deep into that. We're also going to take a look at, we do this as like everything else that we've been watching, but I'm just going to mention it straight up because people are excited about this being back. We're going to talk about, and I've got to do it in an Oprah style fashion, ANDOR. So we'll be talking about ANDOR. The Accountant 2 is in cinemas right now. Simon's going to tell us what he thought of that. There's a film called Until Dawn, which I haven't seen. And folks, that's already too much show. So let's dive right in. Here's the opening titles.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Simon, the thing when you do a Oprah Winfrey style like shout out like that is that you just don't want to stop doing it. You just want to keep on saying it as much
I
as
understand.
possible.
Once you have a taste of Oprah, you just want to go full Oprah for the rest of the day. I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, but also I will say as someone who grew up in that 90s period where I was a student for a few of those years, so I spent a lot of time at home during the daytime being able to watch your Ricky Lakes, your Oprah Winfreys, your Jerry Springers.
What some students would call study time, you called daytime chat show television time.
I mean, it was study time.
Oh, really, was it? Yes.
Well,
Despite the fact you're here doing a podcast age 48, then I get it. I get it.
48? Jeez. Look, probably the thing to realise is I learned a lot about life from two sources. One, Family Ties, and two, Phil Donahue.
Oh, yeah. And two very distinct lifestyle choices, too. The Family Ties family are very much their own beast. And then you got Phil Donahue, the late... He's late, isn't he? He's left us already.
Yeah, last year. Basically, you're looking at two people who've come at life from very politically distinct sort of points of view there. So it's very much the light and the dark. People can choose whichever one's which. But look, I think that the important thing we do this week is we say there is a brand new TV show. It's called ETOILE, and I'm very keen to talk about it. Here's the clip that we're going to play. Sorry, I got so excited about dance, I forgot we were playing a clip. Let's play it.
Your company, it's in trouble.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Reviews don't matter.
Mine is too. I've got union issues. If they strike, I don't have to pay them.
What?
The audience is dead, so's the funding. The seats are empty.
Not ours.
That's right. Once we closed off the balconies, the house filled right up.
We have to fix this.
Okay, fine. What do we do?
We trade our top talent, Paris and New York. Put fresh faces out there. Get people interested in dance again.
In the final episode of the 2012 TV series Bunheads, we witnessed one of the most devastating things I've ever seen committed to broadcast TV. This was a TV show about 4 teenage dancers in a small town in America who are just happily getting away, dancing away in their dance school, when a new dance teacher ends up joining the school to, teach them about the ways of the world. She's a former Vegas showgirl, and these girls all sort of look up to her, but what I thought was really cool about that TV show was that at no point did they ever get too closely entwined in each other's lives. They're all entwined, but there's always this distance where the teenage girls are permitted to just live their lives and continue in their small social circle, and they don't suddenly find themselves, rotating around the actual protagonist of the TV series.
That's good.
It was kind of good. But the final episode of that, we've seen, and it was an Amy Sherman Palladino series, which is what the connection is to what we're going to talk about today. But this is a show that lasted for one season to split halves in a way that TV kind of does that nowadays. And we get to episode 20, or it might be 18, I forget, of the end of the first season of all the episodes. And the girls end up hearing that the dance teacher, Michelle, has gone on an audition. And what we see over the course of like an hour, 5 minutes in, because, that's where the, story kicks off, is her going to a open call audition for dancers. So I'm presuming, I forget what their local nearby city would be. But she's there going in a cattle call. So there's hundreds of dancers all brought into this hall, and you watch the girls who've discovered this audition's happening, and they've snuck in, and they're watching this process from the rafters. So you see Michelle get in there, you see all the personalities outside as everyone's queuing to get in, and you see the brutal way that these dancers are treated by the dance company that's about to, stage the show, mount the show that they're doing. And so you see like these people who are being sort of cut because of the way that they look, the way that they dance, and all these things, which I mentioned the way they dance, but often that wasn't even really the thing. It was about their vibe and what they're bringing to it. And so it's just brutal. You just see wave after wave of dancers all just being cut down. And you're seeing these girls who some of them have entertained the idea that when I grow up, I'm going to become a professional dancer, but they see the brutal reality of it, which is just this thing where art and creativity can all be exciting, but at the same time, there's just this brutality if you really want to make it in something that's as cutthroat as dance.
One of my favourite movies
tough.
ever. I'll just point out very quickly, if you've seen the opening to All That Jazz with Roy Scheider, the Bob Fosse film, very similar in the way that is depicted, and you describe it perfectly. You see their hearts break and their dreams collapse at that very moment.
And I absolutely can guarantee that would have been in mind as they wrote and directed that episode. It would have been a core inspiration for it. But I was thinking about that episode a lot when I was watching this brand new show, ETOILE. So again, it's Amy Sherman Palladino, and she's best known for Gilmore Girls, but had a Emmy Award-winning run with Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Prime Video in recent years. But in between those two, she did two projects. There was one, it was a Parker Posey TV program that got cancelled by the Fox network after 3 episodes. It was understandably why it was cancelled. It was fine, but it wasn't really anything particularly amazing. But then she had this really great show called Bunheads, which, the 12 people that watched it still talk about it lovingly to this day. Maisel, which was a huge success because it was buoyed by all that sort of Emmy attention and some decent viewership, and that ended up clocking out after 6 seasons, I want to say, 5 or 6 seasons. I think they were keen to keep it going, but I think the viewership was probably starting to decline on it, and the writing was on the wall. They probably needed to bring it to an end.
Get out on a high, the story.
Exactly, but look, these are sorry when I say they. So you've got Amy Sherman Palladino, but then there's her husband Daniel Palladino, who it seems as though equally seems to have the same share of writing and directing duties on their programs. It seems like it's a proper shared partnership creating these programs, but whenever we talk about their work, it's always an Amy Sherman Palladino show. It's just, the way that is. She's the name.
Men being pushed to the background again. This is what happens in modern society. It's the TV industry through and through, and film, quite frankly. Anyway, do go on.
Exactly. From the very beginnings of film through to today, it's just always been the women at the forefront. Yeah. But it's kind of like just one of these unique things. And it's a unique partnership because there's not that many husband-wife TV creators like this. You could probably look to Robert and Michelle King, who did like The Good Wife and Evil. And
you love your Kings. Yep.
Love them. But even then, it's still probably Robert King's maybe more the creative force there, and Michelle King's maybe a little bit more in terms of the showrunner producer who's keeping the trains on the track sort of part of it. But I think she's got a creative element in there. But with the Palladinos, it's actually a pretty sort of even split as far as I understand the way that they work. But we talk about it being an Amy Sherman Palladino show. Because of the success of Maisel, they were told, hey, look, you want to do a new show? Here's a 2-season commitment. You're good to go. And so this week we got to see the debut of ETOILE, which is the first season of this at least 2-season show, but I'm hoping it runs for much longer because much like their other work, I really, really like this program. I'd kind of bought into it before I started watching it, so it was good that the show actually delivered at the end. The premise of this is it's a ballet company in New York City. They've got a relationship with the French ballet, whatever it's called, the main company in France, which the distinctive nature of the two, the distinctive nature of the two is that in the US New York setting, it's very much a commercial operation through and through. They rely on a lot of donors to donate money to keep it going. But they really are reliant on those ticket sales. They're reliant on this being a commercial endeavor. Whereas in France, it's actually a government-run organisation. So it's kind of a bit more like, say, RABC, but for ballet. So you got that. So it's two entirely different sort of structures taking place. But both of them have very similar issues, which is that while both have their dedicated audiences, ballet is not necessarily seen as the sort of most modern of artistic endeavours these days. So there's certainly always a need to be able to drive excitement around ballet and bring people back to the ballet. As a way to do this, the head of the French ballet company, played by Charlotte Gainsbourg, says to the American guy who's running it, as played by Luke Kirby, who people would know from Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He's the guy that played Lenny. She comes to him and says, hey, look, we'll do an exchange. So this is something that's actually happened in real life. They haven't made this up for the program, but they also made it up for the program because they didn't do their research and didn't know this is a thing that actually has happened in the past and kind of happens regularly. But the premise of the show is based around this idea that they are doing a talent exchange where the French have chosen a couple of dancers they want to bring over and a choreographer who's kind of like a star choreographer in the making. So they're bringing him to France, and then the New York-based ballet company is bringing over a whole bunch of French artists. So that's kind of the premise of the series, and so you're seeing the, not necessarily quite cultural clashes, but certainly a lot of people have been taken out of their element who are now all sort of working amongst it together. And you look at these two distinct ballet companies in different countries who somehow they find excuses for the talent to constantly cross over, and you see them a lot talk to each other throughout the course of the season, probably way more so than would actually happen in real life outside of, maybe 3 to 4 meetings, and that'd be about it. But they are constantly in each other's lives because it's TV, and you're seeing essentially the Gilmore Girls or Maisel style relationship dramas taking place in this new context. So if you're familiar with those programs, you kind of know what you're up for here. But what is probably the really unique innovation to what the Paladinos have brought to this is they are very well known for motor-mouthed characters who have a lot to say and are more than willing to say it. There's lots of pop culture references that get dropped in. Not common pop culture references. They're always obscure things just sort of dropped in here and there. The passions of the Paladinos really are...
They love a good needle drop too. There's some excellent use of music throughout this. It opens with the disco scene with Blondie, with the styrofoam head guy.
Well, both Amy and Dan are massive music nerds.
Sure.
So they love music, they love dance. Okay, so this is very much them sort of playing in their wheelhouse.
Because her mother was a dancer in real life. I was just doing a bit of back research on this, and it turns out this is kind of a world that she knows of, at least, to add a touch to it.
I think Amy had entertained the idea of being a professional dancer at one point as well.
All right, so it's all coming together.
So it's all very much there. But they're very well known for their rapid-fire dialogue, and that's certainly present in this show. But because you've got this French ballet company involved in the mix, it means that half of the show is in French. So it doesn't necessarily change much, because I don't think that the Paladinos really went to a lot of effort to consider the cultural differences at great depth. But they certainly, there's a bit of a surface level in there, and you just see hearing it in a different tongue. It really sort of livens up the show in a very different way. And so also even the English language portions of it, you're hearing a lot of people with heavy French accents delivering the lines. So what could feel a little bit stale after 4 different series of Paladinos, and that's, I think, 7 or 8 seasons of Gilmore Girls, 5 or 6 seasons of Maisel, 1 season of Bunheads. Like, this is getting close to 20 years of them in our lives. We know their pitter-patter, so be able to mix it up in the way they have for this show has been I wouldn't say necessarily a welcome breath of fresh air, because I didn't realise I needed that, but also it's probably just a smart move to keep it feeling vibrant.
Let me jump in there, because I am not as high on this show as you are, and one of the key problems I have with it is that dialogue. And I just want to make a point very quickly. That dialogue, if it exists at all in real life, even in TV real life, this rhythmic, very... what comes across as very over-familiar banter between people, it really belongs in the domain of people who are close and tight with each other, like the small-town interaction in Gilmore Girls or the quick-witted world of stand-up comedy in Mrs. Maisel. This is not the way, by any stretch of the imagination, that people arguing over the details of a major ballet company cultural swap would address each other. Now, look, I'll be blunt with you. I was willing to stick out the first episode. The other member of the household was not. I don't
think she was a Mazelhead, though, was she? I'm trying to remember.
No. See, now that's the thing. We're not bringing any past Palladino connections to this. She'd been a Gilmore Girls person, and I'd watched a few episodes of that. None of us have ever seen any Maisels. So I kind of went with the first episode being almost like an old school, a bit like Moonlighting in the rhythm and the banter is going back and forth between Charlotte Gainsbourg and Luke Kirby because they've got kind of a history together. So I was willing to let that slide. But when the Simon Callow character came in, when the underlings within the two ballet companies are facing off against each other, if these two writers, Dan and sorry, what's her name? Amy Palladino, have this sort of rich history of crafting sharp, witty dialogue amongst a group of characters, as you suggest. That opening scene where they discuss Tchaikovsky having syphilis is one of the worst opening scenes in a series that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. I think it probably plays better if you think about these people at 4 o'clock in the morning having that chat. But
absolutely,
when you're thrown into a TV series and it's the first time you get to meet these characters, I don't think it's the strongest.
That was a tough call, yeah. I thought that the character played by Lou Delage, who I know as an actress from the Woody Allen film she did a couple of this time last year that I interviewed Woody about, and she was lovely in that. She's clearly sort of strengthened her presence and bulked up a bit and put on muscle to play the ballet dancer. But that awful one-shot scene on the Eco Warrior boat where she's going around screaming at each other, it's the worst character introduction I've seen in a long time. At that point, that was the first time I went, I'm not watching 8 episodes of her. I cannot stand this woman. And then as the episode unfolded and rolled into episode 2, and I've watched the first 2 episodes of this, there was a little bit of a softening of her character, but not very much. So I think it's playing to 2 very different realities, whether it's the TV sitcom / drama sort of feel that this dialogue maybe suggests.
Okay, well,
the Palladinos are more comfortable in, or it wants to be like a Fame, and there's certainly nods to Fame in that in the first episode. There's actually costuming that nods to Fame in that first episode. It just seems like a really awkward fit.
Well, I mean, it's them. Like, this is what they do. So, look, there's a couple of things I just want to drive through there. First of all, let's just talk about Lou Delage for a moment. So she plays a character where when you write her character synopsis down on paper, it feels pretty tired and you've sort of seen it before. So she's a very strong-willed dancer who won't let the world sort of stop her in any possible form. She doesn't sort of adhere to anything which is a boundary, whether that's actually a personal relationship or even physics at times. She's just an absolute force of nature. And you say that out loud and it's like, well, I've seen that character before in so many things, but I don't think we've really seen her quite like this before. Like, she really does sort of imbue like such a angry energy on screen. But in terms of just thinking about Lou Delage, actress, she didn't speak a lick of English before she started on this program. So she's gone from not speaking English to suddenly having to speak in the Palladino cadence, which is such a heavy part of the program, and as is with all their programs. But you kind of have to think about... And look, I hear people complain about, people don't really talk like this in real life, but that's kind of what I like about stylists in terms of dialogue. I put the Palladinos in the same framework that I think about your Aaron Sorkins on TV, that I think about my Dave Mamet's in terms of his crime dramas. If you want to think back to a lot of the sort of 1940s and 50s black and whites.
I was going to say it's screwball comedy. That's what I thought they were going for.
That's her inspiration. If you even look at the fact that Amy's named her production company Dorothy Parker Productions, it all very much hews from that. If you're not someone who can, if your ear isn't attuned to what the Palladinos are into, you're not going to enjoy this program.
Yeah,
the reality is that it's if you don't like the way that David Mamet writes his dialogue, you're not going to like a David Mamet film. Okay, you're not going to like this if you don't like their wavelength. And they've got a very specific way that they talk. They've got a specific way they enter into some of the cultural conversations they want to have on the program, because they're really sort of niche and specific. The sense of humor, particularly in Daniel Palladino episodes, is really on the nose sometimes. And even I, an avowed fan of these guys, sometimes find myself watching a Daniel Palladino episode. I'm like, guy, you're just like standing on the edge right now. Tone down your Daniel Palladino-ness. You find it especially on display in this season. There's a storyline that happens maybe 2/3 of the way through where somebody ends up going to hospital and is in a coma, and there's an ongoing joke about the level of coma this character's in, because this character's been in comas before and is at a, this level or that level. And those jokes, like, I was really on the edge, guy. I really cannot do this right now. But what I want to take it back to is, you were saying that it softened a little bit in the second episode. The thing that you find with all of their programs is that I think the first 3 to 4 episodes of any of their series are just a complete mishmash of premise and setup of premise versus trying to find their way into the characters. I think episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is the second half of the season here, I think they start to actually work out what was working in terms of the character dynamics they'd set up, what wasn't working, and they start to lean into it in so much more of an interesting way. I would agree that I found on first watch the introduction of the Cheyenne character, played by Lou Delage, just a bit too much to really contend with. But I've watched it through to the end of the season. I've seen the way that they've really modified her character and are working to her absolute strengths. And having come back and rewatched that first episode, which I literally just watched that scene on the boat about 5 minutes before I sat down and started to talk with you, Simon, the scene played so much better for me this time, because
Even to the point of going to the end of that scene and the police are there, and when she turns around, all the sailors run back into the boat like they're frightened of her. That seems so... well, it is. It's dumb.
And
that's what I came with.
Tonally, it's different to most of the other stuff you see throughout the season. But every so often, they really do sort of lean into, like, really sort of heavy moments of whimsy in that sort of a way. And it doesn't necessarily always play with these guys. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It worked on a rewatch for me, but I will say the first time through, I saw that scene and I wasn't entirely into it.
Okay. I'm interested in what you said about the premise for this, because my first reaction was... and the fact that you've said that it's, I get that cultural swaps are done and lead dancers go to other ballet companies around the world, but to do a straight swap of major stars, my immediate reaction was that there's no way Parisian audiences would care what New York ballet artists are like, that they would consider their ballet artists the best in the world, and this is all one way as far as the New York people are concerned. So that caught me a little bit, excuse me, a little bit off guard. But you point that out that, that does happen in real life. The other thing to me is...
Well, sorry, just on that, I can't speak to necessarily the level of star power and sort of who they were really sort of focused on. They do address the fact that Cheyenne is like their big name dancer, and they were fairly reluctant to let her go from the French company to head to New York. Okay, all the artists that they chose from New York weren't necessarily people that would be their star talent as much. Sorry, there is one star dancer in that, and I can't remember how much they introduced her really in that second episode, so... you may not necessarily have seen her sort of...
that's the African-American dancer who's wearing all the New York stuff? Okay.
Yeah, who's one of the few actual, like, real-life dancers that they've employed on the program. Okay. But her character, she kind of comes from Parisian arts royalty. So her mother is, a fairly well-known presence. So her coming back is a really big deal in terms of them selling the ballet to France.
They seem to unravel a lot of, or any goodwill that they may have established when when Charlotte Gainsbourg has that scene with the minister, and the minister didn't know that Cheyenne had been sent to New York. That seemed preposterous. There's no way that there wouldn't be a whole chain of command that would have to okay something like that. Look, I get that this is living in a fantastic sort of Palladino world where these things happen for the benefit of their writing and their premise and those sort of things. But you're right, you've either got to buy into it and go with it, or you're on the outer. And I'm sorry to say, because I know they've done good work, but I'm on the outer with this one.
Yeah. Look, I'd be curious to see if you actually sat down and watched Maisel, sort of how you'd feel about that as a program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, I can see this sort of
a lot of the
banter.
whimsy you don't like in this, you would find in abundance in Maisel.
That's kind of the feel I got from the bits and pieces I'd seen of Maisel. I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But I quite liked Gilmore Girls back in the day, but I was a much younger, more spiritually open man back then. I'm a crusty old cock right now. Anyway, that's it. All right, so we can see this, all 8 episodes, is on the Amazon Prime platform there for you to binge over this long weekend, lest we forget our soldiers.
Yeah, so look, if you're into the Paladinos, you're going to eat this up. If you're not, then you're probably going to struggle with it. But also, I would say that the problem with them being on Prime Video is that you've only got 8 episodes, and these are guys who I really think it takes a while for them to find their characters to really imbue that love. So by the time you hit the end of the first season, it's going to be a bit of a gut punch that it's over, because it's right when it's really clicking, I think.
Okay, it's called ETOILE. What does ETOILE mean?
ETOILE is French for star, and it's usually what a ballet company refers to their star performers.
Okay. Good to know. Thought I was going to catch you out then, but you shut me down. Well done. No. All right, I went to the movies.
Gross.
The big screen. I know, and it's not a great week for movies. There's a bit of filler product out there. But certainly first amongst that is Accountant 2 with one Mr. Ben Lopez Affleck.
That's really not true anymore, but...
Who knows? The way they are, by the time this episode comes around, they could be back together.
Well,
so I'm just covering my bases, yeah. Let's have a look at a clip.
I spent years looking for you. Do you not miss me because of me, or is it your condition? I'm just me.
Welcome to the Boise Romance Festival.
How are you?
I just love accountants.
That's a coincidence.
I like camping.
So do I.
I thought I saw an Airstream in one of your photos.
Yes, that's my home. That's where I live.
Oh, permanently?
Well, as long as I'm alive. Oh. Eventually, this body will be a corpse.
What do you mean you reverse engineered our algorithm?
By tokenizing your questions in an embedding matrix and generating a predictive model for the most effective answers, which I provided.
So, for me, from its title on down, I would suggest that there's enough droll humour in Gavin O'Connor's rather unlikely sequel to the 2016 sleeper hit to almost counterbalance just how utterly bonkers this story truly is. Our man, Mr. Affleck, the most square-jawed Ben Affleck, he's the titular autistic number cruncher, this time aiding government woman Cynthia Adi Robinson to track down an immigrant family tied to her late mentor, the J.K. Simmons, who featured in the first film, and doesn't feature for long in the second film. That's not giving anything away if you've seen the trailer. Now, added to the cast, or in a role that's been bolstered from the first film, is John Bernthal, who is kind of everywhere at the moment, which I'm okay with because I think he's pretty cool. He brings some serious sort of support player chops, upping the comedy and the carnage components considerably. This is a solid piece of action thriller filmmaking, but, and this is a really big but, it pivots into some utterly asinine directions. Notably, 2 points that I want to bring out. There's a secret society of autistic hackers that Ben Affleck works closely with, that he's sort of set up to help run the computer networks of the country. I'm going to come back a little bit later to how this film portrays autism. The other thing I want to mention is that there's a plot device that impacts a character that suggests that severe brain damage can bring on its own form of neurodivergent sociopathy. She's a killer who, after a terrible car accident and experimentation on certain parts of her brain, she's now the ultimate killer. At which point I sort of went, oh, please, this is so stupid. And it's easy to push past those moments when you're trying to look at just an action thriller. And if you're happy with the shoot 'em ups, which eventually come around down on a compound in I want to say Venezuela, maybe. Or if you just like a little bit of beating up the tough guy action to get the information out of him, that certainly has this. But when you factor in the plot devices that take a something like autism and all the various places on the spectrum that condition exists, and uses them in such a B-movie way without any real thought for how it's portrayed on screen. I got very, very icky with this film. Now, before I did this review...
that wasn't your concern with The Accountant 1?
No, it absolutely was my concern with The Accountant 1, and has often been my concern with when things like dementia or autism or Down syndrome or all those sort of conditions are portrayed on screen in a manner that are one-dimensional or only serve machinations of the plot and are not given their full... And I know that's a sort of a tough thing to try to drill down on, because Hollywood and film industries all over the world have done it to varying degrees of shame and success since the start of cinema. In The Accountant, they address autism by Ben Affleck saying it's not a condition, it's just who I am, which is about as sensitive as the film gets to how he uses his autism and how he's able to be the accountant and the sort of the crime solver that he is. But the whole thing sort of made me feel icky, and it kind of put me on the wrong side of what in every other respect is a entirely passable but not exactly special sort of action thriller. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've got a real problem with, and this is more of a TV thing than it is movies, but there's so many TV shows where it's autism as a superpower.
Yeah, well, exactly, which is kind of what it is sort of, it perpetuates this myth, having this secret society of autistic hackers who are able to, sort of access every computer terminal across the country, even right down to smartphones. It just got sillier and sillier and a little bit more offensive the longer it went on.
Yeah, and it's a bit hard for, people like us who aren't necessarily neurodivergent, or at least not diagnosed as such, to be saying, oh, it's offensive. But, you just kind of know that it's on the nose.
Yep. Yeah. And like I said, as with The Accountant 1, as with Rain Man, as with, whatever, but so many of the film, excuse me, so many of the films that portray it, you can either sort of, okay, I'll go with it, I'll see the positives of it, and I'll do that, and that's fine. I just found a tough time going with it in Accountant 2.
Yeah, I was really surprised to find there isn't The Accountant 2, on account of the fact that I saw The Accountant 1, and it was fine, I guess, but it was just, it just kind of felt like it was a disposable sort of throwaway film. It didn't seem like it was any more, important to the Ben Affleck sort of filmography as a Hypnotic. Do you remember Hypnotic?
Oh, well, goodness me, yes. What a fine piece of cinema that was.
Yeah. But no, it just kind of felt like it was another way to generate films where, you got a paycheck.
Well, it also caught Anna Kendrick on the rise too, and none of the reviews have mentioned that she's missing from this, and I think she's a big omission from this. Obviously, I mean, not because there's a place for her character, and I wouldn't want her shoehorned in here, but the first film was sort of about her discovering what he can do, not just about him. And the character played by Cynthia O'Dea Robinson is trying to be that sort of Anna Kendrick role in here, far less successfully, I think. I think Kendrick's talent was really on display in that first film and helped it become the hit that it was.
Yeah, the critic Scott Tobias had a piece which was very much just talking about the fact that Kendrick is missing and what they try to do to play the whole doesn't really necessarily work for it.
Yep, exactly right. It's in most cinemas now. This one has small screen, rainy afternoon, or beer and pizza sort of feel about it rather than a cinema trip. It's not a great looking film either, and Gavin O'Connor's done some great work as a director. He did that boxing thing with Joel Edgerton and was it Tom Hardy or Christian Bale or something? But yeah, he's made some good films. He's a South African director, but this one feels very much like I've got nothing else going on for 6 weeks. Sure, let's do The Accountant 2.
Yeah, worked obviously with Affleck. Sorry, I just loaded up the filmography here with The Way Back, which was fairly well regarded back in the day.
It was. Okay, so which brings us to a very important part of the show where I put to you, Dan Barrett, what else have you been watching?
You say it's important as though it isn't just an opportunity for us to talk sort of briefly about things without
very
fun clips.
Briefly, trust me, very briefly this week. What else have you been watching?
Look, so I don't know how brief we want to be with this one, but Andor. Sorry,
we should not be brief about this. This is a big deal.
I've got a little bit of Oprah in my throat here. 1 second. Andor! Sorry.
You've got a little bit of Oprah in your throat. That's a T-shirt. We should get that printed up.
Yeah. A phrase never said by Stedman.
Don't make me cough. All right, go on, do your thing.
Oh gosh, I hope the lawyers don't hear. Look, so Andor's back for a second season. We saw the first season back in 2022, so it's been a little bit of time between drinks on this one. Writer's strike really set this one back quite heavily. But look, the show's back, and look, I think we know what Andor is at this point. So for those who came in late, basically Star Wars, it's been a very popular series of movies. You may have heard of it.
I know of it.
It's very much a family-friendly IP, but they decided they were going to do a very adult version of it. So a lot of this TV series is talking about the political machinations taking place between the backroom meetings within the Empire, but then also the rich dilettantes who want to see an uprising take place. And
the formation of the resistance.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to watch it. It's not necessarily people that are coming at it from sort of downtrodden, we need to, reclaim our entire ways of life again, as much as well-to-do MSNBC viewers who are just trying to, get involved in there and talk about being part of the resistance, wearing their pussy hats without actually really rolling up their sleeves to do much more than that.
Focus.
Well, I'm sorry, it's just that's what the series really is. So as we take up this series, it's 1 year after the previous season. We see that Andor is a bit more deeply involved in the resistance work than he was in the first season, where he really was kind of the plaything of the wealthy elites, and decisions made sort of well above him were impacting him in the way that he lives his life. So he's trying to sort of... He comes from a point in the first season of just not being all that involved in the uprising at all and just kind of finds himself in the center of it. In this, he's doing a lot more active work, but you don't really find that in the first 3 episodes so much, in that the season opens with him involved in a mission to steal a TIE fighter, and that's very funny because he gets into this TIE fighter and realizes it's a lot more advanced than his piloting capability allows. And so he doesn't know what he's doing, and I think it's the first time we heard the word shit in a Star Wars production, again, because it's all for grown-ups. But you see him really struggle to get this TIE fighter out of the
in a cracking bit of effects work. That looked terrific too. That whole opening sequence sort of had me hooked straight away. I
think all the stuff with the TIE fighter that you see across the first 3 episodes is all phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's the sequences where they film in front of the volume, which is that background screen that they use on the new Star Wars productions, that when not filming on the volume, the show looks fantastic. As soon as they film on that volume, it just looks like trash.
Changes straight away. All that stuff in the wheat field was just, I looked
That's
at it
it.
and thought, it really looks like a kid's painted this background.
Yeah, so for the first 2 episodes, you got the storyline where Andor's landed on a planet where he's supposed to be handing the TIE fighter over to another revolutionary who's going to take it to do whatever they need to do with it. Okay, but that person isn't there. Instead, there's this warring set of 2 camps who are arguing for reasons that aren't really explained to the audience.
No, they're not.
What we kind of see for the first 2 episodes is really just busy work to keep Andor off the map. There's a lot of other stuff the show needs to get set up in these first 2 episodes, and that is the wedding of Mon Mothma, who we know from the Star Wars films as a very minor character that has been grown out in the books and comics and stuff in the years since. But we saw her all through the first season of Andor. She's the main woman at the center of trying to get the revolution up and running. Okay, so she's organizing the finances and doing that in between, teas and other fancy things that she's involved in. In this one here, we see her all ready for her daughter's wedding. So this was kind of set up in the first season, where it's kind of like a betrothal rather than a love marriage. But the daughter seems into it, so that's all fine, I guess. But you get to see what a lavish, fancy Star Wars wedding party looks like through these 3 episodes.
Which looks pretty cool. Once they bring out their version of a disco ball, which is literally the disco, turns the whole, and they all start dancing. Those sequences.
Yeah. Let me just quickly finish this bit, and then we'll just get to
for sure.
So 3 episodes where they're more or less looking at some of the wheeling and dealing taking place at this wedding, and part of that involves taking what's his name from Coupling. I can't think of that actor's name. He played Patrick in Coupling.
I don't know what any of those words mean.
Coupling was a TV show, Simon. It was quite good. But the silver-haired gentleman that was helping provide the funds in the first season. As we find out, a year later, he's gotten divorced from his wife. He's gotten some bad financial shape. And so they are like, you know what? We can't trust this guy to necessarily be involved anymore. He's probably going to squeal. So they kind of make a decision to take care of business. So that happens across these 3 episodes. And so to get to that point, it's really important we spend these 3 episodes at that wedding going through all of that.
Yes.
But then you've also got the storyline, which has all of Andor's, extended family from Ferrix, I think was the name of the planet in the first season. They're out there in this wheat field planet now, hiding out from the Empire, who are checking for people's papers to see that they're legitimate. And so, the pressure's on them. The first 2 episodes are perfectly fine. By the time we get that 3rd one, though, it is incredible. The tension has ratcheted up. We're seeing the tension at the wedding as she's, getting involved in that sort of decision to, take care of couplings Patrick. But then, when that's happening, she goes out and just dances her ass off out on the thing with this great dance sequence, and that's sort of cut to what's happening on the planet with Bix, which is the lady sort of not quite love interest for Andor, but, suddenly adjacent to love interest. And so she's there being threatened with sexual assault from some guy from the Empire. And so she ends up attacking him. It's the first time that we hear the word rape in Star Wars. It's the first time that you hear characters actually express sexual desire in any possible way. It's a really sort of interesting scene, and so all the conversation this week about Andor has been less on the program itself and more the decision for the IP to go there.
The first 2 episodes are talky, but in a way that draws you in. There's a lot of toing and froing between the wedding, the crashed or the TIE fighter amongst the gang in the forest there, and the wheat fields. There were a couple of moments where I started to drift away attention-wise, but that's more on me than the show.
I did the same thing. I watched it late at night on Wednesday night, and I'll admit I actually fell asleep during the 2nd episode. But I've gone back and watched it again.
It gets a little talky. There's a lot of characters going on. It's in the hands of Tony Gilroy again, so it's all quality writing, but it does require a bit of attention to stick with it. That all comes together in that 3rd episode, and I absolutely understand why Disney Plus have dropped this as a 3-episode bundle, because so much of what is set up in those first 2 episodes builds to the punch that is episode 3.
I want to just on that really briefly. It's not necessarily for that episode as much as the way they're rolling out the 12 episodes this season. They're doing them in batches of 3, because if you remember the first season, so much of it was just these arcs, and so they're kind of treating it like a sort of movie event over the course of a month.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Yeah, those first 3 episodes felt exactly like that, and that.
So we'll see that again next week and the week after again, and
when the TIE fighter comes into sort of the calculations on the wheat planet there, and when the assault takes place, that is some of the most compelling, and didn't blink, didn't look away for an instant when all those things were unfolding, all to the incredible sort of dance sequence that accompanies the wedding. I thought, that 3rd episode was one of the best things I've seen in a long time.
Really enjoyed it. And again, a lot of the plotting and elements of it are things which we've kind of seen before, but at the same time, it's always in the execution.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah,
it's on Disney Plus.
Absolutely sterling. Sorry, there was a point that I just wanted to make really briefly, which was that the person we probably haven't talked about here is Denise Goff is back in the 2nd season as well. She plays, I'm trying to look for the character's name, Dedra Miro. And what's going to be interesting with her is seeing the way that she continues to rise through the ranks of the Empire.
Oh, she's the blonde one married to the Weasley guy who's having dinner with his mother.
That's right. So we get to see what a relationship with mother-in-laws is like in the Star Wars universe, which, again, another first.
That's what the kids are screaming out for. That's clearly what the fans want.
But what's going to be interesting with her, and you have to look to the first episode of this season, in that episode, she's introduced to the character played by Ben Mendelsohn.
Mendo's back.
Mendo's back, as he was in Rogue One.
Yes.
Because this is a TV series that leads right into Rogue One. So it's going to be interesting seeing how she plays a role in terms of the bureaucracy, setting up what he's trying to get happening, which is effectively laying the financial groundwork down so they can build the Death Star, which is obviously where Rogue One was very much set.
That was an interesting sequence and speaks to exactly what I was talking about it being that first episode being quite talky, or maybe the 2nd episode when Mendo's addressing the boardroom and they play that extended Gorman Spiders
which feels like a 1960s, 1970s education film.
I know, it really did. I was sort of cool, and then the 2 sort of young suits do their pitch and Mendo has to shut them up. That was a talkie and a long sequence with a lot of shifty eyes going along. You can always, like Homer Simpson said, you can always tell the bad guy by the way their eyes move. And there was a lot of that going on in that scene. But yeah, I'm absolutely hooked for season 2. Worth the wait.
Yeah. The two things just on my mind about it, we'll get out of this in a second. First of all, the only reason I think Andor necessarily works is that we've got so many decades now of Star Wars as a kids' family property. And so seeing this where they really are exploring the sort of adult ideas of Star Trek for the adult audience who've grown up with Star Wars, sorry, did I say Trek? So with Star Wars over the years, that's what works about this. If this was the standard status quo from Star Wars going forward, I'm not sure it would be as enjoyable. But if we were to get a series which is looking at the sort of adult, grown-up elements of the Star Wars universe every couple of years, I'd be very much okay with that. I can see a world where we see the Mon Mothma TV series spun out from Andor, because I'd be very excited to see that. So if Beau Willimon's into it, who's writing a bunch of episodes last season as well as this season, if he wants to run that, I'd be very keen to see that. And the other thing is, I'm not a big fan of Rogue One at all. I think there were lots of things about that film that were, just lazy and just fan service. But I'm really curious to know how my relationship with that movie will change after 2 seasons of Andor. So I'm actually excited about hitting the final episode of this season and then pressing play straight away on Rogue One, which I'm sure lots of people will be doing.
Yeah, and I that I come 180 degrees from that, because I think Rogue One is arguably the best Star Wars film, and I'm also keen to roll straight into my umpteenth viewing of it after this season for that very same reason.
Ironically, because of the big fan service moment at the end of Rogue One, you then have to roll straight into Star Wars A New Hope.
And before you know it, you're watching... Well, Revenge of the Sith is back in cinemas this week for its, 30th anniversary?
Is it playing in cinemas here?
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's all around the place.
Is it playing on VMAXs, or is it just playing in...
It's at all the major chains. I'm not quite sure what auditorium.
It's probably playing on the small screens.
You'd think that, because it's been remastered, you'd think they'd give it there'd be at least one session a day on the really big screens.
Yeah, I don't know. They've got to count it 2 screens they've got to get through.
Go out to your Campbelltown one. Get a wraparound Sith experience.
Well, look, as you
never say those words.
Please. I mean, that's the dream I've been trying to, get to in my entire life. Do you want to tell us all about Until Dawn and Hell of a Summer while I look up session times?
Okay, I absolutely will. A couple of teen-themed horror films to check out in cinemas this week. Until Dawn is the new film... I'm going to cough again. I got very close to making it all the way through this without coughing. Until Dawn is the latest video game adaptation out of Hollywood. I don't think it's going to do the same sort of numbers that other video game adaptation has been doing. But probably mostly because it's got some really hardcore horror moments in here. This is from the PlayStation Productions people. Until Dawn was apparently a huge hit for them. But just like a Minecraft movie, this one is... I guess you could say it's satisfactorily cinematic. It absolutely leans into its inevitable US rating. It's the story of 5 friends caught in a Groundhog Day meets Final Destination world. And that's nodded at in a throwaway, funny meta moment in the film as well, which is a film that doesn't have a lot of humour in it, but what is there kind of works. It also is very much exists within both a gaming / nightmare logic, which means its unfolding terrors kind of makes sense, but the whole premise isn't really derailed when it doesn't make sense, if that makes sense. I found some of the killings to be really well staged. I found the actual setup and the unfolding of it to be one of the better sort of adaptations of those horror games. The other ones, I guess you could say Silent Hill was a similar sort of movie that took the horror principle and turned it into a pretty good film adaptation. Strong lead turn from a terrific young actress called Ella Rubin as well. So Until Dawn is very good. The other one is Hell of a Summer. This is the movie that has been directed or co-directed by Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things. This is a horror comedy which takes the whole premise of a summer camp killer and spins it out into a friendship clique sort of comedy drama. The killings are pretty bold. This one opened the Fantastic Fest, Australia Fantastic Film Festival, in Sydney and Melbourne last night. He's going to be playing a few sessions over the next few weeks before heading to the small screen. Good young cast. Billy Brick is a co-director and a co-writer of this alongside Finn, and he's very good in the lead role in this one as the nerdy guy trying to make good. Some fun moments, and they're certainly fans of the slasher films. It's no Scream, which is kind of what it clearly wants to be, but it has some fun moments. So it's called Hell of a Summer. What time's your movie on, Dan?
So, just letting you know the state of play in Australian cinemas this weekend. Sinners no longer has any VMAX screens at all.
Ouch.
Which is very disappointing. Looking at the Sydney market here. But, I've got most of the Sydney screens open. Most of those the VMAX screens are going back to Minecraft, as well as The Accountant 2.
Right, okay. And where's your Star Wars on? Where's your...
and it's still got an IMAX screening every night, so that's pretty good. So if you are keen to see Sinners and you're in Melbourne and Sydney both have IMAXs, there's a new IMAX on the Gold Coast in Brisbane. From Brisbane. A mate of mine made the hour and a bit drive to go and watch it in IMAX the other night, and he said he didn't regret it at all, so
great.
That's a big plus. But yeah, you can find it on, Star Wars Episode 3 on VMAX screens.
Nice.
Bondi Junction, Burwood, Campbelltown, George Street, Hurstville, Liverpool, Miranda, they've all, everyone's got a VMAX for it. Also, if you want to see it in 4DX, as George Lucas could never have possibly dreamed of back in the day, there's some screenings of that as well.
Nice. There you go. Helping out people get to the movies, which is what we like to do here on Screen Watching. Get off your couch and watch it on the big screen.
I'm going to say Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, not a fantastic movie by any means. Okay, there's certainly elements that aren't really great, but there's a number of really fantastic set pieces in that movie. Yep. And I don't think it gets recognised anywhere near as much as it deserves to, because
I think...
there
was such a stink about the first two in that series, and there was such a unpleasantness that came out of that trilogy, that by the time it got to 3, we didn't give 3 the credit where it was due. I think the last 15 minutes of that around the volcano are as good as anything in the series. They're really powerful scenes.
And that brings us to the end of Screen Watching for another week. We'll be back with more of this probably next week, same time, same bat channel. My name's Dan, joined by Simon. If you want to find us in our various other endeavours, you can find Simon Foster via the Screenspace newsletter. Just do a bit of a Google search for Simon Foster and Screenspace, and it'll come up readily enough. Sign up to that one, like and subscribe, all that business. You can find me over at alwaysbewatching.com. It's a newsletter that comes out 5 days a week talking about the world of TV and streaming. And of course, we've got our other podcast. It's called Best Movie Year. And we're chasing the very controversial idea that maybe 1987 was the best year for movies. The only way we know that is by watching 100 movies from 1987 and then offering our very sort of highly esteemed opinions as to what we thought. Anyway, find that one. It's Best Movie Year, and there's a newsletter for that too. But if you just search for Best Movie Year on your podcast apps of choice, you'll find that one readily enough. Anyway, we will be back next week with more of this. We'll see you then.